Yeah.
Okay. So we are good, Steph?
Yes.
Okay, so I will call our Mayor's Task Force on Infrastructure meeting for Wednesday, March 19th, 2025 to order. And thank you for joining. And I'd like to begin in a good way by acknowledging with gratitude that we live and work on the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish, whose peoples have been stewards of these lands and waters surrounding Naklelahoem, Bowen Island. And so first item on our agenda is the introduction of late items. I will look to you, to our Deputy Corporate Officer for the introduction of any late items today.
I don't have any.
Not seeing any. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda today, please? Moved by Councillor Saunders,
I'll second.
seconded by Mr. Florendo. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that carries. Second up is adoption of the minutes. Are there any changes, amendments, modifications to the minutes from our January 15th meeting that folks would like to make? Not seeing any. I will solicit a motion to approve the minutes or adopt the minutes.
I'll move.
By Councillor Wake, seconded by Mr. Florendo. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that carries. Next up is public comments. I'll look to our Deputy Corporate Officer for any public comments here today. Not seeing any. That is, well, great for timing, but too bad that nobody's here to chat with us. Number 4, updates. 4.1, and I'll hand it over to staff for an update to our Chief Administrative Officer for an update on the community center.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we have actively started moving our stuff to the new community center. We're actually a little bit ahead of schedule because we were in our plan, we're supposed to start March 21st, but with the internet outage this morning, it kind of motivated us to get an early start on things. So we've been labeling things and we're getting ready to move in. We're going to unpack everything and have it set up in the main reception of the new municipal area on April the 1st. And there'll be a few days where our offices will be closed to the public, but we'll be providing services remotely and via phone and email. So that'll be from March the 26th to April the 2nd. And there'll be a few days where staff will be working from home. That'll be March 26th through 28th. And then by March 31st, all staff are reporting to their new municipal hall offices. And we'll unpack all their stuff and get set up on that date. And on April the 3rd, we're doing a little bit of a soft opening to the public with the official grand opening on April the 15th. So it is happening. And during that soft opening period, between now and the ribbon cutting ceremony, there'll still be a little bit of construction work happening, and that's mostly to identify minor deficiencies and get through the deficiency rectification process to achieve total completion on the project. So that is, and hopefully this won't be an agenda item in about 3 months' time or 2 months or whenever we're totally in there and totally done.
Right on. Thank you for that. Any general questions to the CAO on the community center? Councillor Saunders.
Just a real quick, this is a curiosity more than I'm looking at on the web page for it and the kind of the floor plan of the place. Where are the council meetings going to be? Is that community conference room?
Yeah, it's when you first go through the main entrance, it's the large room that's on the left.
Yeah.
Like right there at the front. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I was just curious. Okay. Thanks.
Okay,
Awesome.
Yeah. It's been a long time coming, this one. Okay, moving on to 4.2, some operational highlights. Here for that narrative is our Director of Engineering, Patrick Graham.
Oh, you're muted, Patrick. operational highlights. I don't really, I don't really have a lot to report operationally. I was prepared to speak about capital projects, but if there's any questions, happy to answer them. But I'm not sure what we were meant to be discussing with this agenda item.
Okay, here, I'll just jump in, Mr. Mayor. So in the agenda package, there's a highlights from January to March about all the activities that Public Works have been doing. I guess it would almost aligns with what I would consider first quarter. And some of the main work that was done is we did some water main upgrade work in the Blue Water Park area. There's a photo of some of that work in the attachments. We've done some training and pump servicing at the wastewater treatment plant with their staff to get them more familiar with the equipment that's there. And in addition, there's been some confined space training.
Want me to share the screen, Karen?
Yeah, yeah, it would be good, I think.
Okay.
And if the director of engineering has any further insights on these items as I go through them, feel free to jump in. So yes, those are the first two items I talked about. Scrolling down, we spoke about the confined space training, the leak inspection and repair planning for the water main leak at near Carter Road Bridge. Is there any background information on that?
No, I mean, that one was addressed. There was also some leaks in the asbestos cement pipe, the service connections to those pipes on Senator. Those were addressed as well. And there was also a leak it's been an ongoing leak at the Carter Road Bridge that has been fixed temporarily, but it's really needing a water main replacement, which is one of our capital projects that we've got upcoming.
Okay. The next item here is some inspection work we did on the Hood Point supply line and multiple meters in Eagles Cliff. So we did have a period of below seasonal temperatures. We had a little bit of a cold snap, so we did some proactive inspection of these exposed above ground water lines, and there were no issues, as I understand, but feel free to correct me, Mr. The Director of Engineering, if you have any thing to add on these.
No, nothing.
Okay. And then, did you want to touch on this flushing that's been happening?
Well, the flushing is ongoing. I mean, we've had a bit more challenges with the Cove Bay system because of the leak we had at the Carter Road Bridge, and then also it's flushing used to be straight from the lake as the water source was, and now it's from a tank that's only being filled by one of our two filter modules at the water treatment plant. So it has to be staged in a different way, and it drags out over a longer period of time. Yeah. Didn't realize we wanted to get into all these operational details, but fine to do that.
And then, yeah, there was a service line repair on Senator Road, and that was rectified. If we go down further, we we did some work on the electrical panel at the Cove Bay system, and carrying on here. And then those are some other additional highlights. So I guess what the intent of these is that at some point when we have our workflow management system up and running, which will be an additional model to our citywide asset management and GIS program that we have, that we'd be able to provide data and metrics on number of service requests that were completed since the last meeting. And the idea here is just to give the community a line of sight into the great work that our public works team and operations team does out there every day in support of their infrastructure. And so that's just a sampling of some of the main activities that happened since the in the first quarter. So are there any questions on this content?
Over to you, Don.
Sorry, that's why you should wear gloves when you're using foam. So, the Carter Road Bridge leak, was that from frost, or is that a north construction defect, Patrick, or just happened to happen, or was it near the bridge or what?
Yeah, it's near the bridge. It's on the west side, just on the west side of the bridge, and it appears to be a hole in the it's a steel pipe at that location.
Oh,
And it doesn't appear to be related to any kind of freezing of the water line or anything like that. I'm
like a
not
hole in the
sure.
pipe, a hole in the
It's a
pipe,
hole
like
in
a
the pipe.
faulty pipe or something? Was it anything related to what North did? Any construction activity?
I no, it wasn't in their
No.
construction area.
Hmm.
I can't see anything that they would have done that would have caused
Hmm.
that. You're talking about north,
But
the doing the multi-use path.
oh, well, I thought North did who was the contractor that did the bridge?
Oh, that was Coquitlam Ridge, which is part
Oh,
of
okay.
BA
Okay. Sorry, I thought it
Blacktop's
was North.
family of
Yeah.
companies. Yeah. No, it
So
wasn't
nothing to
related
do
to the
with
bridge
nothing to do
construction.
with the contractor.
No, no. But it did cause us to take a closer look at that pipe that crosses Terminal Creek at the bridge. And it's a pretty high risk situation.
Right.
We've got an unknown pipe that's embedded in a concrete weir that's got a pretty high degree of deflection and deformation to it. And if we were to lose that line, if there was some major storm event and some big logs came down the creek, for example, we'd be in a major
So,
crisis situation. That's
yeah,
supply to the whole cove.
so that line was kept active as the bridge was reconstructed, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And was there any attempt to upgrade or protect it, or did that come into the, I know we're getting off topic, but just a curiosity, because I remember going down there and seeing it hanging there. They was kind of worked around it, but I don't know. Maybe we're getting off topic, so
Yeah, I think
I'll,
if you have any
I'll
specific
redact that.
questions, maybe we'd be more than happy to take an email in and try and address those. But I think, I don't see a linkage there. But if you have some additional questions, we can take those
I'm
offline.
good.
Yeah.
Totally redacted.
Okay.
I think this is great. I think it's great to see kind of a quarterly, just bird's eye view, and particularly in visual and pictures of everything that's been going on. I'd love to see some of this go out in a narrative on our social media feeds as well, because just looking at the scope of some of these projects, like we've got Blue Water, Cove Bay, Carter Road, Eagle Cliff, King Edward Bay, and some of the Senator Road, like some of these photos are pretty impressive. And I think getting them out into the public sphere and just letting them know the work that the public works crew is doing in a visual and sort of narrative way is great. And I really appreciate seeing it in this format. So thank you. For
Yeah, yeah, and I think the intent here was to show these operational highlights to see if use the leverage the expertise of the committee to see if there's a potential capital program that might need to be on our plan just from observing patterns. So it serves that purpose as well. So we're happy to present this information. Thank you.
Okay, and then I see that there's some asset report cards tied to this. Maybe we'll just leave those till. Are we going to be talking about? Do you want to talk about this now, or do you want to talk about it as part of asset management in 5.1?
Well, I can say is that we've worked on asset management report cards. I think the intent is to put these in our annual budget books as another, because it does tie into the overall infrastructure deficit concept, and so this is kind of the output of, and I don't know if they'll make an appearance for this year's capital budget, but that's the intent going forward, is that we will have a piece about asset management in our budget books.
Great.
Where I was just trying to flash just to give the public a little glimpse. It is catching the wrong screen. There's water mains and culverts and roads in the agenda package.
Okay, great. Any other questions or comments before we move on to the capital project status update? Not seeing any, so we'll consider all of that received, and back over to you, Patrick.
Okay. Maybe I'll just, rather than going through every item on the capital projects list, I'll just provide some updates on what's happened since our last meeting. So starting with the Cove Bay Water Treatment Plant. So we've continued to have problems with the water filtration equipment. Purifics was on site in January, end of January, and they were unable to visually determine which of these ceramic filter tubes were defective. We have one of the two modules that's neither one of them is passing a direct integrity test, which is what tells us if we're meeting all of our water quality objectives. One of them, Module A, comes close to passing that test, and it does reduce turbidity below 0.1, which is the maximum target. So we've been running the plant with that module only for some time and supplying water to the system. It's a significant improvement over the water that was coming straight from the lake, but it's still not where it needs to be. So Purifics is they've manufactured this portable testing equipment that's going to allow them to test each of these ceramic tubes individually and pinpoint the problems and replace them. So they've apparently sent that to us. We haven't received it yet. And their intent was to make their travel arrangements as soon as we received it. So we're waiting on that and waiting for them to come out and fix those filter modules. We still have the issue also of the plant not being able to meet rated capacity. That's really just based on testing one module and seeing how much we can produce with one module. And it's not really anywhere close to the rated capacity. It's about 65% is what we're able to run at. So that's a bit of a concern, especially with the Eagle Cliff connection that's planned. And there's some major development that's in the planning and early construction phases as well, such as the Grafton Lake phase 2 and beyond on the south side of Grafton Road. So I mentioned Eagle Cliff. I'll just touch on that one too. So we have the same contractor that's that's contracted to do that Eagle Cliff Cove Bay connection that is doing the blue water work. They're proceeding well with the blue water water system replacement and the Bowen Bay well upgrades and the system interconnection with those two projects. They're probably going to be finished those in May. And then their intent is to move over to start on the Eagle Cliff project. We haven't been able to give them a notice to proceed for that project because of the Cove Bay water treatment plant issues. So that's becoming more and more of an issue. We've essentially passed the deadline where they've told us they were willing to hold their contract price until. So we will be facing additional costs, assuming we do proceed with them. We don't have, they've indicated that their contract price will increase by, all of their contract price will increase by 5%. And there's possibly higher increases for materials that are procured from the US, which I believe includes all of their ductile iron pipe. So they provided a rough estimate of $500,000 increase in their price, and that leaves us in a situation where there may need to be additional borrowing. But we really need to have this functional water treatment plant, to be able to make some decisions on how we proceed with them, or don't, if that's the case. I mentioned the blue water work. The multi-use path extension is probably about 85% complete. They've constructed most of the trail base. There's a section adjacent to a steep ravine that had to be redesigned, essentially changed from a retaining wall to a fill slope, which helps to provide additional support for the road as well. So that there's really only minor cost increases that we expect to become accommodated within the project contingency. We're still, for the wastewater outfall replacement, design is essentially complete. We're just waiting on the permitting processes, and we did get some feedback from the agencies that are handling those processes that they're facing really long backlogs. And so there's a big question mark around the time frame for that project. It is urgent because we're not in compliance with our permit to discharge at the moment, and we need to replace that outfall in order to be. So trying to get more information on that, but it's proving to be difficult. Our road rehabilitation this year is likely going to, or maybe entirely focus on the blue water area. In the course of constructing the water mains, a lot of those roads are chip seal, and it wasn't really possible to limit the extent of disturbance to the 1 meter wide trench that they're excavating for the water mains. So the extent of damage to the road is substantially more than that. And we're just trying to figure out what the best way to deal with that is. Ideally, we would pave the whole road. It is, a 15-year-old chip seal road. It is in need of that, but we have some budget limitations. We only have $550,000 road rehabilitation budget, which isn't. We would need twice that to pave the whole road where the water mains are being installed. So we're just looking at potential options. We had a company out here recently that does chip seal. it's not it's not our preference to do chip seal, but and it would be a challenging thing to do in terms of getting the road prepared for that. Another option is that we pave half the road and do the other half next year or the following year. Um, yeah, there's a number of other projects that are in the works. We haven't made a lot of progress on them since the last time we met. Um, I will maybe provide a bit of an update on the path forward for the service yard upgrades. So we've been in this place where we have a 50% design by an architect team, and then we had some design done by Liberty Contract Management to come up with something that would be meeting the same operational requirements, but at a lower cost. In discussions with our CAO, I think our next step is to issue an RFP to hire an owner's representative that can assist us in developing and administering a design build tender. And then we would proceed to that process, getting competitive bids for a design build job. Of course, project financing requires borrowing approval, so that adds some uncertainty to the project timeframe. Yeah, if there's anything else, any of these projects or any of the other projects on the list, or projects that you've had in mind, I can answer questions or provide additional information, whatever you'd like.
Sorry, I was muted. Looking to the committee for questions or comments, clarifications. Okay, not seeing any. Moving on to 5.1, asset management and public work staff. Over to our Director of Engineering and CFO.
Okay, so for asset management, I mean we've built a lot of our inventory with the key information, particularly for some of our more critical assets like the roads, water mains, culverts, and we've produced some asset report cards which provide an overview. We've got some work in progress that's looking at developing long-range capital replacement plans for those assets. There's a lot of work involved in getting the required information into our asset management software, including all the key characteristics of the assets, like their condition, their risk rating, their estimated remaining service life and capital replacement costs. And we're now in a position where we have a lot of that information for some of our assets, and we're proceeding to develop these long-range capital replacement plans. There's other assets that we still need to do a lot of work on the inventory and characterizing what we have. I would say our progress has been not as quick as we would like with the current complement of staff that we have. We have requested this year an additional position, an asset management coordinator, or potentially there's been discussion more recently about making that position broader in scope, where it would be a technician or maybe not an engineer, but somebody with engineering expertise that could assist in delivery of capital projects as well as asset management. The other big piece that we're working on with relating to asset management is developing a workflow management system. So essentially, there's another module in the PSD citywide software that we have that's called Maintenance Manager, and that would enable us to track service requests and work orders and link those to specific assets in our asset management software, so that we have a lot more organization of the the operational work and the capital replacement work. We're able to better plan for the capital replacement work and integrate that with our budgeting. And it's also going to be very useful in terms of communication with this committee and with council and with the public, if we're tracking our service requests and work orders in this manner. So those are the main things related to asset management. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Kern.
Yeah, I think for the position, because that's part of the discussion here, is that we felt, so historically is my understanding that we had two senior or more senior level engineering people in the engineering public works department. And we have had only Patrick. And so when we looked at this asset management coordinator as a senior management team, we thought it would be better to have that person have a little bit more of a broader skill set and be somebody who can offer continuity in the department during times when the director of engineering is away, and at the same time could also advance asset management, but also be able to advance a few capital projects. So as we bring this forward, we're beefing that position up a bit, and it'll be part of the budget requests. And I invite any comment from our CFO on this. And it all, the historical makeup of the department predates me, but it's my understanding that we've always had a degree of not redundancy, but backfilling and an ability to have some continuity, especially as we have staff transition in and out. It's always good to have somebody who can keep things moving along and when we have staff transitioning in and out of the organization.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add a little bit to that. It is true, we always had a director of engineering as well as a manager of engineering and operations as well. So I'm one of the person who could kind of provide a more direct link between the operational side of the engineering department and offering support on the capital projects, and then a lot of the roads work, and doing a lot of the technical stuff behind the scenes. So there's a report coming to council on March 24th. It's a request for direction to staff to draft the budget bylaw. And in there, we were tasked with reviewing all of the FTE requests across the department, across all departments. And given that there are a significant number of the FTEs that are coming from the engineering and operations side, you can really see where we're putting our focus. What we felt was that if we're going to dedicate or we're going to be able to really move this project forward, then we're going to have dedicated staff who are tasked with this. And we've been trying to kind of limp along for the last couple of years by adding and backfilling some staff, providing additional capacity for existing staff to work on this project. And again, we're finding that it's just not enough. So that is what will be coming forward to council on the March 24th agenda. There's also a change to the original staffing request, and it is part of the recommendation that's been set in the agenda for the MTFI committee today. And that is relating to the 1.4 FTE being requested for the parks staff, the parks operational staff. Originally, the budget did anticipate that perhaps parks and operational staff could take over part of the non-contract piece of waste removal, solid waste removal, being from the beaches, from the parks, and in Snug Cove. After having a conversation with the contractor, we've pulled back from that position. We do believe that it's probably something that we need to wait until the contract is renewed at the end of December 2026 before we look at making substantive changes like that. So originally, the ask for the staffing was that 2 full-time parks crew operators would be hired. We would not move forward with the summer park staff hiring, so we would have 2 full-year full-time employees, which would augment the capability of the roads and parks crew, take over some of the waste collection duties in the cove and at the public parks and beaches. But now we feel a better model, given the feedback from the contractor, would be to just move forward with 1 and keep our summer park staff. So there's an adjustment there that's coming forward to council for a revision to the staffing request in the 2025 budget. I think that's all I had.
Yeah, I just before the committee weighs in on asked questions, I just the reason it's just showing up here is in terms of the community center, there's an ask for a position in terms of the programming around the community center, and the community center joint management committee did provide a recommendation to council to adopt that. There was about 20 emails from passionate members of the arts and culture community. I think we all agree, and that's the reason why this committee was formed, is because we all identified infrastructure as a main concern of Bowen Island, a critical issue. And we're bringing this item forward so that the committee can lend its voice on the staffing requirements for us to advance what we need to do to maintain our existing infrastructure and also enhance what we have.
Would you like me to put the different options of the resolution on the screen, Chair, Mayor?
Maybe let's have a discussion first. So I think this is a good discussion to have for this committee, and one, teasing out the asset management needs of the organization, but the second, really well, or that I'm happy to see here is a discussion of the full-time equivalent. So for the community members on the committee, we're going to have a council meeting on Monday where I think the FTE requests coming from staff are going to be discussed in some way, shape, or form, because there is 4 to 5 FTEs being requested from staff, which would represent almost a 10% increase in workforce. So this is sort of the first step of due diligence in bringing on new employees, as most of the requests are coming from Public Works. So I'll pause there. I do have some questions that I want to ask to get things straight in my mind, but I'll look to committee members for any questions or comments that they might have on this. Go ahead, Lindsay.
I'd say at a high level, I'm definitely in favor of the FTE for the asset management coordinator. And this is speaking from a space that I do actively work in capital planning and project management for buildings and portfolios, and also worked in that space at Bentall Downtown for a number of years. And I would suggest leaning more towards, not an asset management coordinator, but I think the latter of what was discussed, someone with more of a focus on project management as well. Because I feel that if you have a strong person looking after asset management, capital planning, and project management, that FTE cost, which I think is the concern that we're talking about, should likely pay for itself through good oversight and management of these high cost projects. So I would see, ideally, if you have the right candidate, this position should really pay for itself when looking at the overall cost of the meeting.
not to oversell the position, but it will give us more capacity to write grants and go after grant funding to have this extra position as well.
Other questions, comments? Councillor Saunders.
Thanks. Yeah, I've been on the record for a while now. I was thinking that position, getting the assessment work done is critical, and it does have to be somebody's job. It's got to be their prime job. It can't be, we can't have an expectation that Patrick, for instance, could do it with the 10,000 other things he's tasked with. Something as important as this, and I think it's one of the most critical things we have in front of us. It absolutely requires somebody that's dedicated to it. I'm pleased to hear Lindsay's comment that maybe we can find the right person that can that's got enough skill set to do all of these things in one role. And they'll have full days certainly, but yeah, I'd be in favor of trying to find that person and making that a priority for us.
Other questions or comments? Michael.
Is there any opportunity for specific grants related to asset management to help the community with it? Because then maybe some short-term costs could be borne by the grants, including the FTE that is required.
Yeah, I could. Sorry, I have an answer for this, but if the director of engineering and CFO want to tag on a piece at the end, they certainly can. Yes, there are grants. Historically, Federation of Canadian Municipalities had a municipal asset management grant for planning. We did look at maybe using that as an opportunity to supplement this position, but it would only be a 1-year bump, and ultimately we would have to fully fund that position. So what we're looking at is using a grant, municipal asset management planning grant for a road condition assessment. We currently do not have a full road condition assessment, so the idea was to do one with a mobile van that collects data and could also collect some LiDAR survey data on our roads, because whether it's for something like ferry, like all the ferry markings in Snug Cove, we don't have as-built in some of those cases that we can hand off to an engineer for design work. So I think using the grant money to do that is probably a better way of leveraging the grant money than to try and put it into an FTE. And with that, I'll hand it off, because I believe our director of engineering had a piece that he wanted to add to this as well.
Yeah, it was essentially what you said, that that there are grants available, but we decided to direct them into other areas. We have so many needs in asset management, and even with something like collecting road condition assessment data, the process of doing that it doesn't take all that long, but then there's a fairly long process of actually making use of that, putting that information into form that's useful and can inform our decisions about how we should prioritize our road replacements. So that's, I guess, another reason why we need more support in the office.
Go ahead, Don.
I may be misconstruing something, but this proposal from PSD citywide,
Yes.
is that something coming up on the agenda, or is that because it's tagged on to the end of the asset slide?
That's the proposal that for implementing this maintenance manager module, which I referred to earlier, is the process that we would use to track our service requests and work orders, and then all of our significant operational and capital replacement jobs would be associated with a work order that would be linked to an asset. So then we're tracking all of that information.
Oh,
So
okay.
that would be the firm that helps us to implement that.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Um,
okay. So have they been hired, or
we haven't hired them yet.
does that tie into the discussion we're having now about this FTE or part?
It ties in that there's in order, I mean, it's one thing to set up the software, and then there's another thing um, to actually use it in the way that
Right,
it's intended. And
right.
so that would be another focus of the position that we'd be hiring would be
Okay, okay. Well, so that's where I was going. So I know,
running this maintenance management system.
right. So I noticed that they're headquartered in London, the
Yeah.
ESD folks, even though the proposal's from Victoria, but the headquarters are in London, Ontario. Same
Yeah,
location, same location as Purifics.
Maybe we can get them to drop
So
in.
yeah.
exactly where I was going, but notwithstanding that, would have they given would they might offer some advice uh based on, yeah, I mean, if you engage them, they might offer some advice on this position as well to fine tune it. No? Or they
I
might
just,
be.
yeah, I was just going to jump in. Like it's, I mean, the person who gets hired as the asset management might deal with this program. It's not the focus, and it's not the main reason
Oh,
why we're asking for the FTE. The
okay.
FTE really should be thought of as a separate position to not only advance our asset management program or roadmap to advance it, but also to supplement it with some project management abilities as well. But
Right.
the other thing, the third thing, and this is very important, this is almost the most important thing, is in my mind, is to have a backstop for Patrick, right? He's got, like, if Patrick decides to go on vacation for 3 weeks, there's really nobody there providing direction on capital programs and projects, right? So we need a certain level of continuity and redundancy in engineering. It's a big portfolio. There's a lot of staff there. There's a lot of ongoing projects. So I think, those three things: asset management, project management, and redundancy slash capacity building. I think those are the reasons why this proposal for the citywide add-on. That's just a module onto our existing software. So what it allows people to do, allows their staff to go out and collect data. So if you see a culvert, we log that in this app, and then we create a service request. So now we're tracking our service requests by the number of service requests and how they're spatially distributed, right? And that's powerful data, because if you see common patterns in that, like say you have a culvert that you've repaired the same culvert length 3 times over the last year, that's probably telling you got an issue with that culvert. You should do a capital project or have that in your capital plan, right? So it's just one module, but it's not the rationale as to why we're requesting an FTE, if
Yeah,
that answers
no,
your question.
I totally get that, Kern. I guess what I was intimating, or hopefully intimating, was that with it looked like from the number of clients that they have, like Whitehorse, Yellowknife, you name it, or Aurelia, that they could offer, they might, add some advice to us on tweaking the proposal call for this FTE person. Anyway, that's all. It seemed like they've got quite a bit of experience with smaller and larger municipalities, which is already self-evident. So anyhow, just a note. Don't know if that made anything. I'll mute myself.
Any other pieces here? Councillor Saunders.
I'm just wondering, I'm looking at that recommendation. I'm wondering if we want to, if there's any value to amending it just slightly so that it does take us beyond the asset management program, discuss perhaps project management and the backup to the to Patrick's position. I don't know if that's necessary in this, but I thought I'd raise it.
Thanks. I think that's well stated. Yeah, the question that I have before this comes to council is I'm fully supportive of needing somebody sort of senior in public works that can handle the job functions that we've described so far. I would agree with Councillor Saunders that maybe framing it as just beyond the asset management program is valuable. Coming back to the overall staffing envelope though, and I do want to talk about the parks crew worker as well as the utility operator. I can't remember, and I know that's been described to me, but I think it might be worthwhile for the committee is back in the 2023 budget, I think, or 2024 budget, we did have that the addition of the 0.5 FTE that went into admin support for public works so that would free up, I think it was hoped 0.5 of an FTE to do asset management planning at the time. And so, and if I'm not mistaken, that did get shuffled out somewhere, but I'm curious what happened to that floating 0.5 that's sitting somewhere right now.
I can speak to that a little bit. So that's right. You're correct, Mayor. In 2023, in June, halfway through the year, council approved a temporary augmentation to the staffing complement in Public Works Administration. So it was a 0.5 FTE. The intent was to take work off the desks of the utilities coordinator, the public works coordinator, to free them up to do additional work on asset management. About halfway through the 2-year temp term, that staff member took another job in the planning department. That person became the building and planning clerk. And then that temporarily approved FTE was not fully backfilled. She did continue to do a little bit of the public works backfilling, a little bit of the public works support, but I gather it wasn't sufficient in order to really free those staff up to fully dedicate themselves to that asset management work. So the project did stall at some point. So that FTE in the 2024-5 budget that's coming forward to council on Monday, that FTE has been removed, which is why you see the in the actual FTE count, you'll see the ask for the public works is only a 0.6 because we're pulling out that extra one that we had approved until June of this year, and we're replacing it with a full-time permanent staff member for 1 year, for permanently, not just 1 year.
Okay, great. That's helpful. Next question, and this is I wouldn't go muted yet. Is the so because I'm presuming that these positions weren't a part of a previous 5-year financial plan, but the tax rate is sitting around the same sort of increase, where did the funding for these positions get pulled from? So are there things that aren't being funded, or are there contributions to reserve that won't be happening as a result?
So the funding for the new positions you're speaking of, so one of them, obviously the utility worker, that is self-funded through the utility. So that's coming from water rates and parcel taxes, things like that. The parks operation is coming from the increase to the tax rate that we're asking for this year, which currently now with these changes is sitting around 7.7%. So yeah, so the request for the FTEs, the one for the parks, the one for the asset management are both being requested to come forward from increase to taxes. Now, you also have to keep in mind that because we're progressing along through the year, and by the time these people get into place, we don't have to fund 100% of the wage costs in year one because there's a big gap where those positions aren't filled. So we're only looking at half of the cost showing up in the 2025 budget, and the full cost, the full impact of those costs, you'll see shows up in 2026, where we're still looking back to the 9.5% tax increase.
Okay. And the last question I have that's connected to it is going back to just these high level asset management report cards. So for example, when I look at the culverts report card, we have $3.7 million of assets that are currently listed as a high consequence of failure. Another 6.8 million in roads, or sorry, 11.5, depending on which sort of line you're looking at, that are in very poor condition. And then same with water mains, where it's 10.297 million that are in very poor condition. And I don't know if it's a conversation for this committee or one that we want to have, is the balance between taking on new staff versus, or even getting to a reduced tax rate for this year versus contributions that actually need to go into reserve to address those things. Maybe it's a Kristen question. Like, I'm not sure if you've sort of been in those numbers very much and how we're going to plan for them.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if you had any comment on that.
I will say I think I look forward to having a more robust conversation about this at the meeting on the 24th. But if it can give you some comfort now, what we do have, like, while we don't have a finite defined plan as to what culverts we're gonna replace in the next 5 years, which ones are obviously the most critical. What we have been doing as an organization is squirreling away the funds into that capital reserve and renewal and the roads and infrastructure fund in order to make sure that the money's there. So we don't quite know yet. And when we get better information working with this asset management position, when we get better information as to which ones we should target and which ones to replace first, we'll have the money there to spend it, because we are keeping on the funding side, we are expressing to the community that we do need to keep those tax rates at that somewhere in that 9% range for this year and next year, in order to make sure that we can begin to sustain those contributions. What we have in our 5-year plan is to spend to really try and attack those most significant culverts as soon as possible. And we're looking at spending up to $1 million on culverts in the next 5 years.
If I may just put a finer point on that, is in my experience, the main hurdle in tackling infrastructure projects is, like, money is one aspect, but capacity is the bigger aspect, the capacity to deliver, manage, and execute projects. And I'll just give you one example. If you just look at the Sunshine Coast Regional District, I believe they had 120 carry forward projects. So they had money earmarked for these projects. They just didn't have the capacity to put them out to tender and have somebody manage the project. So I think, having the money able to do them is one thing, and write the grants to get more money. But if we don't have the people and we don't have the project management skills to deliver them, you might find yourself down the road in a situation where we have a lot of these carry forward projects that are identified by council that aren't getting executed. So I think part of these FPEs that we're presenting is to get ahead of that capacity issue and build the capacity to manage and execute projects.
Okay. And I appreciate that. And I just want to be clear that I'm not looking to set up a conversation that's either, that says either we hire staff or we put money away for capital renewal and replacement, because it's clear that we need both. What I'm most interested in doing and having very conscious discussions on is to make sure that the maths, right? So when I look at these 3 asset report cards here, and we're looking at pushing $30 million worth of culverts, roads, and water mains, not including the rest of our assets that are being listed as in very poor condition. And in that red bar on the bottom of high consequence of failure and high probability of failure, we're looking at 3.7, 6.8, so that's 10 million, 16 million that are really sitting at high probability of failure and high consequence of failure, that we've actually got the money to address this. So I think this is a conversation that, whether we want to have it here is good, or this can be the first time that it really gets highlighted, but it's something that council, I think, going into this next 5-year plan, especially one that's going to begin to straddle a next term, is something that needs to be built in and planned for, to ensure that money is there. And being able to have that conversation realistically with the community, that like 4% tax increases on the horizon probably are not going to be it if we want to address crumbling roads, crumbling culverts, crumbling water systems that are at a high risk of failure. So in sum, I guess, yes, absolutely, I'm supportive of this first recommendation for the full-time asset management manager of some sort. I am generally supportive of the addition of at least one, maybe up to the 1.4 for operations and parks crew workers. Utility operator is self-funded. I think we heard in the water committee of the whole that's needed and necessary. But I would like to be having more ongoing conversations about, like, how are we actually going to tackle all of these things that are in the red, and what are the numbers behind it, just so that because right now, to me, it feels like the math doesn't math. Over to you, Don.
Forgive me for asking, but the current, these report cards, would they evolve out of a protocol, like a template, or like a program?
Yeah, they were produced from our asset management software.
Okay, okay. So the one thing I finally clued into it, the colors of the chart, the pie chart, are actually reflected in the risk rating down below. Is that correct?
Yeah, the risk
Yeah.
rating is a combination of
I
likelihood and consequence of
I
failure.
didn't quite get that till I saw that the red was kind of close to the mauve, but now I get it. So I'm just wondering, second question on that, the data confidence rating, is that, and then that's where you've qualified how you've come up with, or how we've come up with the average condition ranking, like the data confidence ratings, some of those are highlighted and some aren't, but basically it looks like historical knowledge and assumptions were highlight. Is that the rationale behind why those are highlighted?
Well, we have different levels of
Yeah,
confidence in, I mean, the pie charts look the same, but for culverts, for example, we've actually gone out and, assessed each one, or the major
right.
ones.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. So you've used observed condition there. So that's a
Yeah.
high level of confidence, correct?
Whereas the roads and water mains, the in terms of the condition, I mean, for the water mains, a lot of it's age-based because you can't see it.
Yeah,
And then for the roads, we've done desktop exercises with staff using
yeah,
the knowledge they have about the system, but we
right.
don't have the same level of detailed condition assessment data that we have for culverts.
Totally
So,
get that. So the higher, like an A rating is the highest ranking you could get because that's verified and analytical, correct?
yes.
Yeah, okay. And then I guess I was just puzzled that things don't look that great, and yet we still seem to have an average condition of fair, not poor.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm that's a good question. I wondered about that myself. Like,
But
it seems like
that's what came out of the software.
so it came out of the software, but
Okay.
we
Okay.
may have to um, like you always, you can take information out of
No, no,
software
no.
and then you
Hey,
have to adjust it.
I'm just asking. I'm not knocking what came out. I'm just, because I have a side interest in AI. So, but, I just, so I understood so I could understand what's going on here. So, yeah, that was my main question, was why it came out fair when most of the inputs seemed to be not looking that great. But maybe it takes into account that your ranking your ranking is more esoteric than analytical. I don't know.
Well, I mean, we,
I
we
got you,
needed
Michael.
to, sorry, I was just going to put a point on these asset management report cards. Is they are living documents. They are going to be refined from year to year, and we are. It's important for us to get the ball rolling on this. So, for example, once we go ahead and do the actual mobile data collection with the grant funding for the road condition assessment, these numbers might end up changing, and we might find that some of these, the pie chart will change. So, in some cases, the output is only as good as the input, right? So, um, and that's part of what we'll be doing with these is we'll be refining them.
Well, one last thing before I shut up here. There's no green on the pie charts now that I'm looking at it.
There's nothing good. Yeah.
Well, no, I
We,
mean,
we,
shouldn't there be green on the oh,
There's
huh,
green on the risk ratings, but some of them doesn't show up like on the roads or on the water main.
yeah.
Yeah, because
Anyhow,
those slices are very small.
okay. They're not that small though.
Yeah. So for example, on the roads, you have about 7 million in green and just under 7 million in red. So you think they'd be about the same if you're looking at total amounts that make up the
Anyways,
pie chart. But
I'm being persnickety, so I'll go
yeah,
back to.
yeah,
That's okay.
there's some refinements that have to be made. And so maybe if I get a chance, my chance for the question is, there is definitely some refinements that would be useful here. Like for example, with the roads, in terms of the assets that are shown as high probability of failure, and high consequence of failure. I'm assuming like you're cross looking at them with regards to either primary or secondary locations, right? Because that's one area. If you have assets that are high probability of failure, but they're either unmaintained or tertiary types of roads, it might be useful to do a pie chart specifically for those high important assets. Similar, I guess, with the culverts in terms of culverts that if they were to fail, they're the only access into, or they restrict access from a road perspective into various areas of the island, as opposed to having secondary routes. And the same things, I guess, with the water mains is looking at the main uh, large diameter water mains and then which one of those um, are in that high probability of failure, because that way you can then prioritize your spend.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That really comes out with the capital replacement plans.
Mhm.
These report cards are just a snapshot, but to really get into the details of what are the priorities, what do we have to do and when, we need to progress that into these long range capital replacement plans. And for the roads and culverts, of course, those plans have to be linked
Mhm.
because you're if you're doing a road, you have to do the culverts as well.
Yep.
And
And then potentially, if you're doing a road and you already have some water main replacements set up, you can likely take advantage of that. So you're paving, you're limiting the amount of road deconstruction and replacement if you're able to combine some projects together.
yeah, and I mean this year we're probably going to be spending most, if not all, of our road rehabilitation budget in Blue Water because that's where the water mains are happening. Not necessarily because those roads were rated as the highest risk. So there's a lot of
Mm.
um, there's a lot of integration that needs to happen between assets, between asset categories.
Sounds like there's a need for a full-time position managing those opportunities.
Yep.
Yeah, that's part of it.
So do we think we should separate these two ideas then, Mayor?
Yeah, I think we should sever them, so we can get the first one on the floor, so that the Mayor's Task Force on Infrastructure endorses the staff recommend. I'm just going to make some edits to this on the
Yeah.
fly, so that the Mayor's Task Force on Infrastructure endorse the staff recommendation that council include an addition of one full-time equivalent 1.0 FTE employee in the 2025 to 2029 5-year financial plan, who will be dedicated to developing and managing the asset management program.
Developing and implementing.
Implementing is good.
Okay, is there a mover for that?
I'll move it.
Or did we want to include the project management and redundancy piece that Councillor Saunders mentioned earlier?
Yeah,
You could. I mean, the feedback I'd have from the chair is when you talk about program management, that sort of like project management is subsumed underneath that. But if you wanted to specifically talk about project management and redundancy and capacity building.
For me, it'd be worth putting in just with a comma or an and, simply because the asset management program, well, yes, there's certainly ties to project management. It isn't as, I could see somebody saying, well, what about project management? Because it is a separate but related task.
Right. That's why I mentioned reading it the first time around developing and managing the asset management program. So
Okay,
it could be
yeah.
developing, comma, managing, comma, and implementing the asset management program.
That works for me, doing it that way, yeah.
And then I think that also makes it explicit that this would be a management role,
Yes.
as I see it, because it doesn't feel like a coordinator level role. Okay, with that discussion, is there a mover for this motion?
I'll move.
Moved by Councillor Saunders, seconded by Mr. Florendo. Any further discussion on this piece? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Not seeing any, so that carries unanimously. So for the next recommendation, the next recommendation that council approve, not approve with the following conditions: the addition of the further requested 1.4 for operations and parks crew workers and 1.0 for a utility operator. Yeah, so we can have a discussion on this. We can approve this. And so I guess what I'm looking for is clarity that these positions are absolutely essential. Because they'll be brought into collective agreement likely. And then we've just seen the discussion on the capital versus operational piece, because operationally, like a 1% tax increase in this municipality gets us $70,000. I think, if that still holds.
Around 83 now.
Around 83 now, so $83,000. So, the way that I'm starting to hold this, it's okay, if we're gonna, it's like, there's one taxpayer, there's 1%, where is it gonna be spent? In operations or in capital investment? And what can we do with $83,000 a year plus benefits plus all of that? Or, that's not the FTE, but if there's $100,000, $200,000 spend on a staff member, that's going to pull out of somewhere else that might actually be spent on the ground. And this is where I think I'd like to start framing the discussion with council is that every dollar spent from here on in, we really need to be having a good look at it and a good discussion at it. Because it's great if we have the staff, but if we can't afford the concrete to pour into the projects, then I think that creates a problem too. So I'll look for speakers on this topic here. Kristen.
I will just say that now this resolution on its own is conflicting with the recommendation that's coming forward from Kieran, myself, and Christina together, who internally did a review of the request for the 1.4 parks, and we are recommending that it be reduced to 1.0. So I would suggest to make that change so that the recommendations are aligned at the very least.
Okay. So in those discussions then, so presuming that there's been fulsome discussions on those FTEs, and so let's look at each of them separately. When we're looking at the addition of a 1.0 FTE for operations and parks crew, what is the critical operational need for that position, and what gap are we looking to fill that's not already being met?
The extent of infrastructure relative, the extent of infrastructure that's in need of ongoing maintenance relative to the amount of staff that we have. So for parks, we've obtained a lot more parks land over the years and additional trails. We've got the Grafton Lake Park, and I think the overall amount of parkland has increased by about 50% in the last few years. We also don't have so it's really the same with the utility and the parks operations needs. We find ourselves essentially dealing with the most critical crisis situations, and not really having the ability to be proactive in any way to get ahead of anything. So if we're developing capital replacement plans that then need to be executed, if we're trying to follow that plan, that's getting to a place where we're proactive. We need to have the staff that can do that will be able to do that. And currently we're hiring contractors for the most part. Smaller jobs are being done by municipal staff, but I think there's some question about the long-term affordability of just given the extent of our infrastructure needs and the cost of hiring contractors to address those needs. In order for Bowen to be financially viable, I think it's important that we build the capacity to be able to do some of this stuff internally at much lower cost. So part of the argument for adding additional staff internally is to be essentially self-financing by saving money on contractors. That's part of the argument. And then the other part of the argument is that we're just behind on all of the operation and maintenance tasks that need to be done around the island. I mean, I would say of the two, the utility operator is probably even more critical. We have 7 water systems, and a utility operations manager and 4 operators to deal with all of those systems. And we have one treatment plant operator that deals with 2 treatment plants, the wastewater and the water treatment plant, who needs to pull his support from that same pool of operators. So there's really, I mean, if you look at something like um, the water mains on Captain's Way and how a lot of the properties are connected to the old main that we want to decommission and need to be switched over to the new main. We'd said a while back that, okay, we can try and save money for the community by having that done internally by our own staff. Reality is they haven't been able to get to it. And it's difficult to see how they will, given all of the ongoing needs that these systems have. Taking on a capital project, even a relatively small one, pulls a, pulls half of your crew away um, from the ongoing needs for the 2 weeks or whatever it takes to do that project. So we just simply don't have the capacity to do that. And without that capacity, we just run into we run into a bit of a wall with our limitations on available funds, and the amount of cost to do each project using contractors. So,
Okay. That's helpful. So I see Don, John, and Tim in that order.
Well, I think Tim was ahead of me, so.
You were actually the first one with your hand up, and then I said
Okay. All right. Well, it's interesting as Patrick was speaking there, I was thinking of the notion, and I'll just throw it out and uh would it make sense? Could we make, and Kern, maybe you have had this experience. Could we think about at a macro scale bundling these critical items into a package, uh, and then going after some large scale funding and and get at least get ahead of the game here because it seems as though we're either hitting a wall or trying to play catch up, and we may never get there, giving staffing concerns or whatever. Would it make sense to bundle everything and get a like a consultant to say, okay, here's the package, and get it done, and then at least get us up to par? Does that make any?
Just I was trying to get some clarity on the question here, and then perhaps the director of engineering and I can answer that. So you're saying that all these items that I've identified as red is like being a part of our infrastructure deficit. Are you saying that we bundle that as one package and try and go for a grant funding opportunity, or am I misunderstanding the question?
Yeah, something like that. Like put it together and get her done so that then we could become self correcting or whatever. But I don't know.
Well, so typically we find with a lot of the grant funding opportunities, they tend to be targeted. The basket of needs, include water, wastewater, roads, and there's, I have yet to see a grant funding opportunity where all of those aspects could be included in one. I mean, for municipal infrastructure rebuild, you will have water, roads, and sewer in that, so that might be included. But and then the other thing is there's usually a cap on funding too, right? So we're looking at multi-million-dollar infrastructure deficit here that we need to address. So I don't know. I would think the likelihood of us being successful as Bowen Island on a $20 million ask would be tough. I think the other approach that a lot of municipalities take is they have a policy in place where they dedicate a portion of the yearly tax increases to infrastructure renewal. And if there's a few examples of those, Vernon has a 1.9% infrastructure levy that grows from year to year, adding to infrastructure renewal so that, when they go for their tax increases, that portion, 1.9%, is baked in and is dedicated only to infrastructure projects. So some councils in British Columbia have passed such policies to dedicate to build money for infrastructure renewal. So that's one way to address it. But in terms of a large package bundle, it can certainly be attempted, but I think it would be difficult for us to do that, and the likelihood of success would be low.
Well, the other aspect of grant funding for capital replacement is that that's typically not what's being targeted. I mean, we tried to find grant funding for the renewal of the Blue Water water system, and were unsuccessful. For the most part, there's an expectation that municipalities are dealing with the ongoing capital replacement needs of their infrastructure on their own devices, and that the grants are more targeted towards expanding a wastewater treatment plant, or and particularly now there's a lot of grant funding that's tied to generating or providing more opportunities for housing. And so you can't really make that argument with replacement of culverts, right? I mean, that's just something that's failed that needs to be replaced. So it makes it tough to get grants for that type of thing.
Just as a follow-up, then, are we at, would you say, from your engineering background, are we at a precipice here, or a tipping point where if we don't catch these cascading issues, it could be a lot worse than what we seem to have identified as fair? Like, are we in a danger? It seems like, well, I don't know. I'm not an engineer. I mean, are we in a danger zone here?
I would say that, yes, we are, and that we're falling behind on our capital replacement needs. If we were using sort of best practice on what we should be devoting for road rehabilitation on an annual basis, it's probably 3 times what we're able to actually devote. And then, we haven't recently had this happen, but we have seen culverts fail, and resulting in the road failing as well, as sinkholes developing. And so I think the longer we go with these high risk assets not being addressed, the greater the likelihood that we're going to have the kind of complete failure that's an emergency, like that's a crisis.
Is our biggest high risk asset right now the water treatment plant? I mean, it seems to me like we've got a few things on fire here, right? I'm just speaking as a
Yeah, I mean, the water treatment plant is huge. It has a lot of implications,
Yeah.
and we all know that that we need to get it working.
If we were gaming this and we came up with a scenario where the water treatment plant, like after we're going to be going into our 4th year of it not being fully operational, I think 4th year of it not being fully operational, at what point would we say, okay, it's not DEP, it's not D-Day, it's some other kind of catastrophe, like at what point do we have strategies that are going to, I don't know, Kern.
I think we're, and I appreciate the sentiment, but we kind of are getting into a realm of speculation here. These things we presented are tools to give a snapshot to the public of where infrastructure is at. Now, nothing we presented here is out of the ordinary for municipalities across British Columbia. I could tell you we have the same types of statistics in Sechelt and Vernon. And if you were to go do a Google search tomorrow for infrastructure renewal programs, I think Oak Bay won an award for one at UBCM. You're going to see the same picture across the province. And part of the reason why, to the director of engineering's point earlier, why they don't grant fund these things is the argument we get from the senior levels of government is that you, as a municipality, chose to give your citizens 0% tax increases for 10 years. And now that you have an issue with your infrastructure, you want to come back to the senior level of governments to address that. So, and we've seen a manifestation in Osoyoos where they did have very low tax increases for many years, and they realized they had to increase that to 30% in 1 year, right? To address that. So I think that's part of the challenges that you're seeing as our infrastructure matures across the province, that you know, the decisions of the past to keep tax rates low and not look at infrastructure in a proactive manner is coming home to roost now. And you know, in Ontario, asset management programs have been a legislative requirement for the better part of 15 years now. And British Columbia, that wasn't the approach, right? So that's kind of where we're at. But I don't want people leaving with the impression that Bowen Island is any worse off than any other community in BC. This is the picture across the province.
So it's not dissimilar to what the province is doing with stratas, you know, mandating stratas that have not done their levies properly and that sort of thing. So I hear you.
You're muted, Andrew.
That's okay. You're next, John. So you're the one talking.
Yeah, okay.
Then I've got Tim and Michael in the queue.
Okay, I want to get us back onto what we're actually talking about here, which is these FTEs, if we can. Because I think we're drifting into a whole lot of discussion that is useful, but not pertinent to this particular topic necessarily. In any event, before I would want to vote in favor of adding more positions, I think it's incumbent on us to see, or at least for council, to see a business case of some sort presented that quantifies the need for this in one way or another. Like, not having these people, not having these positions available is costing us X because we're having to use contractors, and that costs us 30% more or something like that. But I would really like to see something that quantifies the need for these positions. I absolutely believe Patrick when he says, man, do I ever need more people? I have no doubt about that whatsoever. But if we're going to justify more taxes to people, we've got to be able to justify it with more than the conversation we're having here.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Councillor Wake.
My question was on FTEs as well, and I think the easiest way to say it is, are all these FTEs equivalent? Because the position of the asset manager, who's also going to be, you know, a qualified project manager and be able to fill in for Patrick, that sounds like a more expensive FTE than, you know, a utilities operator or a parks person.
Yeah, it would be. They're not equivalent. Some that one, you're right, would be more expensive than the other two.
Okay, so we can't make these decisions just based on the number of FTE, full and partial FTEs. I'm just wondering, do we have a budget number for these?
They're all costed out in the budget plan that's coming forth to council on Monday, the 24th.
Okay.
Also, in the budget package that was presented at the January 20th Committee of the Whole meeting, in the budget book, there is a write-up for each one of the positions, setting out the requirements or what the business case was for why the manager was asking for the additional FTE. And then in our report coming forth to council on Monday, the 24th, there's just a little bit of refinement, some additional information informing our staff recommendation to council.
Thank you.
I could share that link. Kristen, was that January 20th or February? January 20th?
Yeah, it's the budget document presented committee of the whole on January 20th.
I'm putting this link in the chat. Or actually I'll email it.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we're not gonna, like, nobody has time to review that in the middle of a meeting. So we can see that for the council meeting. Michael, I believe you were next on the list unless you've got any follow-up, Tim.
Well, my comment was similar to John's, just to get back to the FTE discussion, but I do want to make one comment with regards to the asset work, and that I think we should there should be a prioritized list that's coming, and I know that the asset management program there will help with develop that, and then from there we can decide what fits in the capital budgets that are coming forward. So I know that's work in progress. So
Okay. Yeah, circling back to me, I'll wait for the reading of the report that's coming to council. I would agree with Councillor Saunders that I think there needs to be some sort of written business case for positions. And I would also support making them term positions for 2025 as opposed to full-time permanent positions, just based on some of what I'm hearing here in terms of operational needs and the scaling up of our parkland and things like multi-use path and everything that's going to take operational funding. Is it sounds like maybe we need to have a discussion as to core services generally. Like, do we have too much to manage at this point, without putting a lot of money into managing that? And the reason I say that, I mean, I'm not necessarily being pessimistic. I just don't have the information in front of me, and I think some of that information will come out by discussion. But we built the community center that we saw a lot of money going into, and it's turning it to be more expensive than it is. I don't know if bringing on an FTE in parks and operations is going to save us money. It just might add more overhead. If we have too much parkland to manage, I mean, I think there's ways to manage that and convert some of it into reserve, or if that's a possibility. But it feels as if there needs to be a conversation over the next year into what we're providing for core services and can we afford it. So that's why I would support these positions for 2025, because we're starting to get late in the season, but as a term position, and then revisit the actual services that we're providing, especially given the financial climate that we're going into.
Mayor, I do have to drop off for another meeting, but definitely please let me know if there's anything else I could help with on these items.
Okay. Yeah, if you have to drop off, go ahead. Yeah, I don't know if we'll get to our closed agenda. I do want to keep us till 5 o'clock today. So the recommendation, if I was to massage a recommendation, I might put forward something that sounds like that the committee recommend the council endorse the addition of the further requested 1.4 FTE for operations and parks crew workers and 1.0 FTE for a utility worker under term contracts, pending the presentation of a detailed business plan to council for their need. And I can put that in the chat for you, Steph, if that's easier.
Sorry, thank you.
Isn't the revised recommendation for 1.0 as opposed to 1.4?
Oh, that's right. So 1.0 FTE for operations and parks crew workers. Yes, Lindsay.
If we could just add that part of that business case, consider the level of service that the municipality wants to provide for the parkland and the potential risks associated with not properly maintaining it. I think that's speaking to what Patrick, you were saying earlier about, there's risks out there, and what you're saying too, Mayor, about, what level of service do we need to provide, which is important.
Sorry, Lindsay, I was doing a little moving things around. Can you
Well, I'll put it out to everyone else. I just want to make sure if we are going to vote on this, I feel good about it. And part of the business case should be assessing the level of service that the municipality is providing with these parklands and how this one FTE additional park operator will help meet that level of service.
Right.
Just
So almost like pen. Oh, go ahead, Karen.
If I can, Mr. Mayor. So I agree with the sentiment. It's just I think at this point it might be just more appropriate to talk about the level of risk in not maintaining this. Levels of service is a overarching wide discussion that should engage the community, and we have to do it across the full spectrum of assets. So I think at this time it might be a little bit too much to take on in the context of this budget cycle to have that discussion on level of service, because we're talking about things like, how many beach accesses do we want? Should we have stairs at our beach accesses? How often do we, do flail mowing of our roads and things like that? So it's a big discussion, but I think it is valid to talk about the services that won't be completed and the risks entailed with not moving ahead with this position. And I think part of that was previously presented in the business case when we initiated the budget cycle. But if there's some missing pieces around that, we can certainly supplement what we've already provided to council.
So, yeah, Steph, before you go too far, I know you're in it to win it. But I would remove the part with the square brackets. And sorry, instead of business plan, I should have written business case.
Okay.
For their need, which I'm hoping based on this discussion here, we'll have some of the risks for not bringing these folks on that council will then be able to have quantified and make a decision on.
Can I put approve up here?
Yeah.
No, I would say endorse.
Okay, so I'll just say that the mayor task force on infrastructure, oops, slippery mouse. Oh my God, sorry. I'm on a glass table.
Yeah,
I can do
MTF.
that.
Yeah.
Endorse.
Yes, because the actual approval comes with the passing of the budget.
Okay. We're happy with this for their need? No. Necessity?
For their necessity, for their need.
Do it. Fancy bit of this stuff here.
Would be helpful to because there were business cases provided previously for these positions. Would be helpful to understand sort of what the group felt was lacking or needed to be expanded on to be able to support it.
Sure, I think that's a fair comment. Maybe I'll look to Councillor Saunders. When you feel into the type of thing that you'd like to see and feel comfortable and confident with moving forward, what would you be looking for?
I think typically, and this may well be in the report that we're going to see on Monday, and maybe we've had in advance and I could have read before this. So if that's the case, I apologize, Patrick. But what I'd want to see is a full description of the position, and then some level of quantification of, and I realize you can't do this entirely accurately. I get that, but if you look at historically over the past year, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is, the number of times you've had to contract out a particular project that, if you had the staffing you could have done in-house, what that cost us, and compare that to what the cost of this FTE is that could do so inside. So if we've contracted out $250,000 of work in the last year that somebody that cost us $150,000 could have done, then the benefit cost ratio is positive, and it's something that we want to be doing. And I wouldn't be expecting to see, like incredibly detailed stuff that'd take you a week to put together kind of thing. But I would like some sense of how much of this is out there more than anything else.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Anyone else? No. So for me, when I hear statements like, we've taken on 50% additional parkland in the last number of years, when I hear statements like, the current public works situation makes the municipality not financially sustainable, there's a one, my ears perk up, and secondly, it's like, okay, well, why is that? What are the numbers behind that? What is the reasoning behind that? And then what are new positions actually going to solve? And if it's not going to, and some assurance that it's going to meet the operational needs that we have. So does this complete it, or are, in 2 years from now, are we going to be looking at adding another position because we're still not caught up and ahead of things? So I know that, that's not necessarily reflected in our 5-year plans, right? Like, these new positions we didn't see, the previous council didn't see 4 years ago. We didn't see in 2023 as part of a financial planning process. So I think there needs to be a bit more of a long-term view that this is going to do it and this is going to solve the needs of the municipality. And if not, like, why is that? And so, I don't have a magic answer as to what is the committee or council going to be satisfied with in terms of a business case. But, I would just take back that it seems like, there's a need to make sure that our I's are dotted, our T's are crossed, and that staff is giving confidence to council that these positions are essential, they're needed, there's a financial justification for them, there's an operational justification for them, and at the end of the day, we can afford them. And yeah, to me, it feels fuzzy now. I'm not exactly sure what to do to make that clear. I think Councillor Saunders is feeling fuzzy about it. So that's where we're at. Also, I don't know if this is something that's, getting turned around for Monday. So, I wouldn't expect to see like a full business case done and planned for Monday. We'll see what we get on Monday because the should be done and made. It might come at a future meeting. So I wouldn't go, burn the midnight oil through the weekend to get us something on Monday. And I would assume that the report that's going to come to us on Monday on this should answer some of it. And if it doesn't, then we'll have a better idea of what we want to, what we'll go back to staff for more information.
We might be able to come up with something if it's straightforward. I mean, there's examples, with we've had projects where we've contracted out, and I think it's easy to determine the savings if we were able to do that in-house. I think that type of an ask is easy to figure out.
Okay.
And if that's what's required to validate these asks, then we can definitely try and attempt to do that if it's straightforward. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. In generally, my criteria is I also don't know the information that I don't have yet. Right. And usually when things become clear, but for me, the marker is when I'm able to go out into the community and defend the fact that we've increased staff for these reasons, for these financial reasons, for these operational reasons, and that it makes sense in my head. That's when I feel comfortable going. And I'm not quite there yet. Yes, Lindsay.
Yeah, I don't mean to belabor this point, but if I was trying to prove this business case out and all of a sudden found that, hey, if we had a person on staff that had the capacity to replace stair treads at beaches XYZ on a regular basis, and that allowed us to avoid, catastrophic failure and full replacement of an entire staircase, I'm sure that cost justification would easily justify the FTE. Like, hey, it costs so little to just repair some stair treads, but we had to hire a contractor for $150,000 to replace the staircase because we didn't do a good job actively maintaining this asset. And it kind of depreciated to the point where it was just catastrophic failure, have to fully replace it. And I think if you have a few of those, it would be a slam dunk as to why this might be required, if you can source out and suss out something like that.
Okay. So we have a recommendation on the floor. We're coming up to 5 o'clock. Unless there's anything real pertinent, I'm going to call the question on this one. So that the MTFI, this needs to be an I at the end of MTF stuff.
Right. Yeah, I'll write it all out. When I'm not on TV.
Okay, recommend that council endorse the addition of the further requested 1.0 FTE for operations and parks crew workers and 1.0 FTE for utility operator under term contracts, pending the presentation of a detailed business case for their necessity. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that carries unanimously. Okay. So under new business, there is a resolution to move to a closed meeting. I'm going to call an audible. We're going to forego the closed meeting for today. We're at 2 hours, and other people have commitments with family and personal lives. So we might come back to some of those at a later date. 7 information items. Yes, Steph?
Sorry, in the closed meeting, I had a list of dates. So maybe I can email those around, or
Email those around. Some of them don't work for me, so
maybe I'll talk to you first then. Okay.
we'll talk about those. Is there anybody online for question period?
Nobody.
Not seeing any. So I will look for a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Wake, second by Councillor Saunders. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
And we are adjourned. Okay.
Thank you.
You
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.